Suprememagus, Chapter 91, An Old Friend. Lid never expected for Celia Festerow to get all sentimental, and in fact she didn't. Her eyes had barely the opportunity to get watery before she stilled up, replying with a giant grin. "Now that you mention it, I really deserve this trinket," she said, retrieving the hand from his grasp and using it to ruffle his short black hair. Celia was moved, but didn't like to show her emotions in front of others. "It's only thanks to the secret stash of meat that I hid and tenderized for you that you managed to grow so big and strong. In a way, I'm part of your family as well," she said playfully, trying to lighten the mood. "In a way, you are part of my family, almost like an aunt," Lid replied, hoping to achieve a critical hit and make her tough mass crumble. He didn't really care much. Otherwise, he would have kept tabs on her health too during all those years. But Lid's debt was real. Without her help and contacts, hunting beasts would have provided meat, but not money or clothing from the pelts and hides. Everything would have gone to waste, making his family life much harder. Lid wasn't willing to keep any tab open, nor he was enough of a scum to forget about someone just because she had apparently outlived her usefulness. Relations were important in such a small community. It was unlikely that whenever his family would need help, he would always be able to promptly return. Also, he had no idea how long the cart would protect them in his stead. Between Nana and Celia, they would have the two most important local figures by their side, leaving the need to call for the Count or the Marchioness only in case it was absolutely necessary. Celia hugged him tight enough to squeeze the air from his lungs. "If I end up marrying and having children of my own, it will be all your fault," she said, sobbing a little. Who would ever guess that rude little jerks could become so cute? Guess I exaggerated a bit. I didn't mean to crack the drama to 11. Just wanted her to feel indebted. "You monster," Solus called him harshly. "Stop playing with the feelings of those close to you. I understand when you do it with complete strangers, since there is no trust between you. But that was just cruel." Feeling guilty, Lid consoled Celia for a while, and gave her the same treatment his parents had received that morning, removing all the accumulated damage and knots that over a decade of hunting incidents had inflicted to her body. It only made her more grateful and loving, which in turn made Solus even more angry, scolding him all the way back home. Later that evening, he gave one ring to each family member. Needless to say, the dinner got delayed half an hour because they would not stop making things appear and disappear like kids with a new toy. Nana had to wait until the next morning to get her own. "I know it's not much compared to what you lost, Master, but it's all I can do at the moment." Mindful about what happened the previous night, Lid avoided stirring the heart of his mentor. "Not much? Stop being stupid, young spirit. You have no idea what does it mean for me." She looked at it like it was a lost son. "No forge master ever accepted to sell me one of these, no matter the sum I offered. They were too scared sullying their reputation. I hope that once you graduate, you will not change your mind and take me as your first client. There is so much I still want to get back. It would be my honor." Nana hugged him, holding back her tears. "What's wrong with these people? I got more hugs by stranger in these 2 days than in 12 frigging years," he thought. "Shut up and get hugged," Solus commanded. After leaving Nana and Tista to their patients, it was time to deliver the last one. Count Lark was very happy to see him. Lit could almost see stars in his eyes while he was staring at the present. Thank you so much, Lit. Having one of my proteges joining one of the 6 great academies is already a dream that comes true. But you managing to make one of these after just 1 month goes beyond my wildest expectations. I just wanted to show you my gratitude. Without your help and perseverance, I would have stubbornly continued with the homeschooling, seeing so many opportunities. Lark patted Lid's shoulder, adjusting his monocle. There's no need to dig up past mistakes. There are more recent events that I would like to share with you. For example, recently the court and the Mage Association have finally deliberated about Headmistress Linea's decision about you and Nana. He made a dramatic pause, waiting to keep his guest on edge, and it prompted him to continue, taking bait and line. They deemed her decision reckless, overstepping the boundaries of a headmaster authority. Her rulings have been revoked, and being the one that presented the appeal, I was bestowed the title of Knight of the Griffon as reward. What is it? It's just a honorific title, thanks the gods, with no lands attached. Basically, I am not considered a local nuisance anymore, but a benefactor of the kingdom. The most important benefit is that when I request a hearing from the court, it takes much less time now. How recently exactly? About 2 weeks ago. Why? Good to know. Lit sighed in relief. If it all happened after the mock exam, it would mean that I'm overdoing things. I absolutely need to avoid standing out too much. So far, so good. No reason, just curious. What about Linnea? What happened to her? Glad you asked. Lark had a smug grin, cleaning invisible dust from his monocle with a handkerchief. At first, she was just reprimanded. It doesn't seem much, but believe me, for someone with an oversized ego, it's a huge hit. Then she suffered the same fate from the previous headmasters from the White Griffon. She has been relieved from her duty and replaced by someone younger and more open-minded. Is that a big thing? Lit asked, being completely ignorant about Mage's internal affairs. It's enormous. Headmaster is supposed to be like a noble title, lifelong. Being forcefully removed like that is the equivalent of making her as a failure. She will never hold an important position again. It's not as bad as what happened to Nana, but it's the next worst thing. Aren't they afraid she could defect the kingdom? And go where? Lark scoffed. Sure, she can sell her academy secrets, but that's it. No one would want someone deemed detrimental by her own country. She could get riches, but she has no need for money. No one will give her status and power back. Lit almost felt bad for her. Being rejected by her academy was the best present that any mage of commoner origin may ask. Without Linjos and his policy, even a ballot would have been of limited use. People like him or Quilla would have been likely forced to quit. And when did this happen? About 2 days ago. Seems someone aced his mock exam. Lark winked at him. Damn it. I opened my mouth too soon. The queen is too decisive. Couldn't have let her resign by her own will with an excuse. What if she tries to get back at Nana? Or me? Lit inwardly cursed. Lark seemed to read his mind, promptly easing his worries. Rest assured, They would not take unnecessary risks. If the court and the association shame her like that was to set an example. I wouldn't be surprised in a few months, when the investigations are finished, she would choose to disappear from the public scene, as in forever. Another wink. That's a nice way to say she will be killed because deemed more dangerous than useful. I must be really careful not to suffer the same fate. Being a part of the political system is a double-edged sword. If I get involved too deep, they will not let me go. Then they use my family to turn me into a dog on a leash. Thank you very much, Lark. They knew each other long enough to avoid honorifics when alone. Sorry if I keep bothering you, but any news about my lost brother? Lid had been true to his words and made the Count keep tabs on Orpal, preparing to deal with him in case he ever decided to return. There is not much to add. Lark shook his head. After getting into the orphanage, he was renamed Mel. As per your request, I moved him in an institution at the edges of the county to make harder for him to get back in case of an escape. He had quite a hard life, from what I know. As soon as he became 16, he joined the military, had been honorably discharged after 2 years, and after that he left Lustria County and never came back. 2 years of military service, Lee thought, enough to earn merits, get rid of the disowned brand, and start a new life from scratch as a free man. I'll keep an eye out for him. What do you want me to do in case he returns? If he has no ill will, then just contact me as soon as you can. Otherwise, I must ask you to do the same thing you would do for your own family. Worry not. Lark offered him his hand, and Lid promptly shook it. If I smell the slightest sign of trouble, I'll make sure he will never bother you ever again. Suprememagus, Chapter 92. Solus Surprise 2. After a bit of chit-chat, the Count was forced to return to his daily routine. He had to manage both his and the fief that once belonged to his late wife's family. Even with the help of his children, it was still a mammoth task. He knew very little of the neighboring Mila County, and most of the old retainers were either corrupt or untrustworthy, resenting the Lark household for what had happened to their previous lord. Even after 4 years, there was still a lot to do and a lack of loyal personnel. Lark had resolved to split the counties, giving Lustria to his son and the Gishal lands to his daughter. That way, both had the opportunity to make their spouses marry in the Lark household, allowing them a much ample choice. Lid could not believe that both the Count's children would have an arranged marriage, while Eliza had been able to spend her life with the men she loved. Nobles had an easier life, but even that came with a price tag. Their personal life had to be sacrificed in the name of the responsibilities that their title involved. Having still a couple of hours before having to return home, at Solus' insistence, Lid went back to the withered zone, allowing Solus to take one more her proto-tower form. That was mean on her side, you know. What did I do wrong this time? He sighed. I said that we have 2 labs. Yet, you didn't even glance at the alchemic one, not even once. Maybe because I have no idea how a master alchemist works? It could be a room filled with gold bars or candy canes. I could not make head or tails anyway. This time, Lit entered the second door, right in the alchemic lab. It was different from the Forge Master room. It was full of stills and small bottles. There were a lot of glass jars, each with its own tag, marking the ingredient they were supposed to hold. Yet, just like the day before, every one of them was empty. Lit walked among the jars. Some were for trivial things like wood shavings or metal beds, while others were labeled with exotic monsters or magical creature body parts. Fur, claws, horns, everything seemed to have a use for alchemists. Impressive, Lit admitted after examining what seemed like a production line. But I still don't get it. Fine, let me give you a recap of the first lesson. Suddenly, Lit found himself in Solo's memories, surrounded by ghost-like shapes that he supposed were the students attending the lesson. It seemed Solus hadn't paid them much attention. They were so blurred to be unrecognizable. The professor instead appeared so real that Lit would have not been surprised if he turned towards him and asked what the heck he was doing there. Hello, my dear students. My name is Palm Raffler, and I'll teach you everything you ever need to know about the art of alchemy. He was a man in his early 30s, about 1.75 meters tall, with short blonde hair and gray eyes. He had also perfect teeth, white enough that Lit almost expected him to shoot laser beams every time he smiled. The tight-fitting clothes revealed a fit, muscular body, full of vigor and energy. He was by far the most handsome man Lit had ever seen. Some of you may have heard that an alchemist is the cheap copy of a forge master. Alas, that's not entirely false, but it's not true either. The reason because the two classes are scheduled together is because I am not going to lie to you. I won't sugarcoat any aspect of this job. So, if at any time you want to leave and join the Forge Mastering course, you can do it. After a second, since no one was moving, Raffler continued talking. First of all, you have to know that I am new to this job. The old professor, like his Forge Master colleague, had almost managed to make this class die. Alchemists already have a poor reputation, coupled with a belligerent fool, and you get a recipe for disaster. Most students choose their specialization courses based on what their parents want or what their heroes do. Do you remember a story with a valiant alchemist as a protagonist? Well, me neither. The crafting department has always been the ugly duckling of the magic, and I don't see it changing in the near future. At least legendary rings, weapons, and armor had to be enchanted, so albeit with a secondary role, Forge Masters appear in those stories. That leaves us completely out of the picture, to the point that many don't even know of our existence. At this point, many should be asking themselves, what I am doing here? Or, why should I take this class? His dramatic pause worked. Lit was eager for an explanation. The answer lies here. Griffon opened his left hand, revealing what it resembled, an orange-flavored jelly bean. After letting the students take a good look at it, he backstepped a bit before throwing it against the far end of the wall at his back. As soon as it hit the wall, the jelly bean exploding, releasing raging flames. Only the class safety measures allowed the students to remain unscathed by both noise and heat. That my students, was a tier 3 fireball. Without letting them recover from the shock, he took out the wand, and with a flicker of his wrist, lightning crashed one after another against the wall in the same spot the fireball had struck. And those were tier 3 lightnings, all cast in rapid succession from a magic wand, with no casting time or mana consumption. Reffler then took a pause, allowing them to understand what he was saying. As I told you before, I'm not going to lie to you. Being an alchemist is an amazing job, where forge masters are like artists, spending lots of time and energy on every single one of their creations. We alchemists are like bakers. The fruits of our endeavors are not made to last, cannot be passed down through generation. They must be prepared quickly in huge batches and for an affordable price, saving countless lives every single day, while laymen just sort us crafter based on our products, calling forge masters permanents and us consumables. I see our jobs in completely different light. Forge masters work to build a better future, but alchemists are the ones nurturing the present. All that you are going to learn here makes the difference on every single battlefield, be it skirmish or a war. Healing potions are vital for soldiers alone on the front lines. A handful of fireball seeds can turn a battalion into ashes, or if planted by hand, secure a perimeter. That's true. They can be used to create minefield, Lit exclaimed. The great advantage of alchemy over forge mastering is that anyone, even non-magicians, can proficiently use the things we create. Not to mention, the price is much lower. On the other hand, though magical items is forever an alchemical one, cannot be recharged. Another big difference between the two disciplines is that alchemical spells require relatively low mana, so each one of you will be able to whip up quite a few things before needing to rest. Questions? What use do ingredients have? Asked a seemingly female voice. Good point. You see, while Tier 1 can be bottled up as they are, from Tier 2 and up, a focus is needed for spells to retain their potencies. For example, the fireball seed I used earlier requires fur of a fire using magical beast, a phoenix rose, or any other ingredient with high fire affinity. The most valuable ingredients have all been found with trial and error process, so feel free to experiment on your own. Next question. I've seen in the price hall physical enhancement potions. Why I have never heard about such spells, and why those potions have side effects, said a male voice. That's an excellent one. The problem with such spells is twofold. First, their cast time is absurdly long. The best alchemists can cast one of them in around 1 minute, and their effect lasts only for 3 minutes. 1 minute? Lit was flabbergasted. Then they are useless. That makes them useless in real battle. Raffler's memory confirmed Lit's assumption. That's why it's much better bottle them up and save them for a later use. Remember, alchemy is the art of always being prepared. With enough time, one of us can have access to the equivalent of several mages' worth of spells. As for the side effect, injecting someone else's mana in your body is akin to poison. Even Tier 1 physical enhancement spells require ingredients to mitigate such effects. They are the most expensive and useful portions for a mage. That's why the prize hall only sells the Tier 1 kind, to avoid students wasting points and focusing more on the permanent magical tools. Alchemy is easier to find and, more importantly, to afford. Those of you that do not belong to really rich noble families would not be able to afford magical items for a long time without the point system. Any more questions? Students asked for explanation one after the other. Lit wasn't that interested in the finer details, so he made Solus fast forward until the professor gave a demonstration of an alchemic spell. He stood in front of what looked like a huge separating funnel, connected with several glass flasks in a production line identical to the one in Solus' lab. After a minute, with just a single spell, he filled the funnel to the brim, revealing several ingredients that had been placed within it, that were now being slowly absorbed by the magic liquid before it got transferred into flask. "See," Raphael said, 10 speed enhancing potion for barely a minute of work. They would cost 100 points in the prize hall, or 100 gold coins in a shop. Even deducing the cost for vials and ingredients, the net income would be around 80 gold coins. Then he proceeded to show how to create fireball seeds before putting an end to the lessons. Lee didn't know if to laugh or cry. This is all so complicated. Between my two other specializations and true magic, I already have a headache. It will take me years to understand alchemy. I just do not have the time. "Maybe and maybe not," Solus replied. "Even in my ring form, I have access to both labs, and in my free time, I have been experimenting with alchemy during the last month. When I am not in tower form, I have little mana, so I can only practice for a little before needing to borrow yours. Anyway, if we manage to get our hands on formulas and ingredients, I can prepare the simple alchemic items on my own. For the others, I will need your help, and once I learn things, I can teach them to you." "Well, yeah, our mining would speed up studying it, but I would still require practice and comprehension for—" "Wait a minute. You had access to the labs? That means you practiced the whole magic circle thingy right off the bat." "Oops," Solus' mind surged. "You got me. Guilty as charged. And why all those students were so faded in your memories? It's like you never focused on one, any, or even none. Even the floor was pictured in more detail. Your perspective never moved from Reflar." Thanks to their mind link, despite she had not a physical body, he could feel anxiety and embarrassment leaking from the surface of her mind. "Solus, don't tell me that you have reached puberty too or something." "Absolutely not," she yelled in a non-convincing tone, her voice gone up an octave. "That would explain a lot. The constant pestering me about girls, the nagging about the lack of romance." "I don't nag," she replied, offended. "Then I don't glare," he scoffed. Lid was about to mention the possibility of her having the hots for the teacher, but preferred to back down. If he was right, prodding her further would escalate the joke, leading to an argument. He really hoped to be wrong, though. Solus having such feelings was one of the things Scarlett had warned him from. Whatever was her nature, longing for intimacy, but lacking any means or even feeling human contact, was something too cruel to bear.
Suprememagus, Chapter 93. There and Back Again. Lid spent his last 3 days studying alchemy and forge mastering. Both the crafting disciplines were very hard to convert into true magic. Alchemy was a weak subject for him. He barely managed to understand the basics, leaving most of the work to Solus. While he studied his clothes, amulet, and magic storing rings, hoping to understand how to replicate and enhance their pseudo cores with true forge mastering. Before leaving, Lid managed to pay a social visit to Protector, Reaper, and Lifebringer. He wanted to be updated about the situation in the Tran Woods, but more importantly, he was fishing for an alchemic ingredients. During spring, animals would change their coats and deer would shed their antlers. What for him was a treasure, for them was garbage, so they had no reason to deny his request. By simply grooming them for a few minutes, he had enough to stuff several pillows. After returning to the academy, life once again resumed its routine, with only a couple of changes. Lid obtained from Floria and Freya training in swords arts, and in exchange, Floria would take part in his silent magic private lessons. Adjusting their schedule proved to be a bit hard, but thanks to Soluspedia, Lid didn't need to study much. Worst case scenario, he would not sleep and invigorate himself to cram through the night and leave the afternoons free. That, coupled with Floria attending to only one specialization course, allowed him to practice often. Months passed, and so the end of the first trimester came. Many students were afraid of the finals and started to compile a list of all the possible trials that could be required for them to perform. Lid couldn't care less. If it wasn't a written exam, with Soluspedia it would be a walk in the park. If the test was on practical nature, he was quite confident to be able to screw it up just enough to be in the top 10, but avoiding the top spots. The day of the finals, they were all assembled in the compulsory courses class, the only one that could accommodate all the fourth-year students waiting for Professor Trask to arrive. Yet, the one that entered the room was Headmaster Lingus. "Good morning, my precious students. This time I bring you only good news. There will be no finals because you have already taken all of them." Most of those present went into panic, thinking that the mock exam had actually been a real one. All those that reached this conclusion cursed the headmaster inwardly for the unfairness of crushing their grades after only a month of preparation. This is one of the changes that I have made to White Griffon's system that no one was aware of. You have been judged daily for 3 months based on your preparation and the effort you put into the lessons. I want you to know that rather than failure or success, special importance had been attached to your progress, to how you learned about your weak points and worked on fixing them. After such prolonged and careful evaluation, any further test would be useless, especially written exams. They would only serve to see who is better at cheating, like often happened in the previous years. The only way to get good grades with my system is through hard work and perseverance, not by goofing off a whole term and hoping for a mad rush to be enough. His tone became harsh during the last sentence, looking straight to some students that cowered behind their desk. Also, there will be no ranking, not until the end of the year. It's another toxic relic of the past that only managed to sour relationships and turned friends into enemies. I will now give you a report card, but it's for your eyes only. In front of each student appeared a blank piece of paper. To read its content, just imprint it with your mana. To who have passed all their courses, you have my congratulations. For those who have failed one or more classes, you'll have to retake them entirely in the second trimester. If you have any problems with your timetable, I suggest you drop a specialization if you are taking more than one. It's better to achieve less than failing entirely. Scared murmuring filled the air. To those that find such judgment unfair, feel free to bring the matter up to the professors or to me, if you prefer. I will give you impromptu makeup test. In case you succeed, the votes will be changed accordingly. There will be no punishment in case of failure. Dismissed. Take the rest of the day to plan your future properly. You have only until the end of today to ask for a second evaluation. Linjos had yet to reach the door that everyone was picking his own report card, infusing it with magic. Lit's one was as following. Theory of combat A. Principle of advanced magic A. Forge mastering A. Healing S. School points gained from daily evaluation 3,000, 3,500. What did I do wrong to get that yes? Do you mean, aside from sharing your spell, proposing brilliant ideas on daily basis and removing the clacker's venom from your body and weaponize it in front of the whole staff? Solus sneered. Damn it, Linjos keeps screwing up my plans. I can't ruin my average score during the finals if there are no finals. That man is diabolical. What is done is done. Solus' mind shrugged. Let's see how the others fared. Looking around the class, watching the students' faces was enough to get an idea of their grades. Those who cried or cursed out loudly had clearly failed at one or more classes. They didn't have to go far. His four friends had taken the habit to sit next to him as soon as they have returned from the 4 days break. What's with the sore face? Uriel asked, looking worried. Did something go wrong? Let's get out of here. Lit replied with a whisper. To not betray Linjos' expectation, it's better to talk somewhere private. He pointed with his thumb to the heartbroken students. Everyone nodded. Then they got up and exited the room unnoticed. Uriel's place was the closest one, so they headed there. After closing the door behind them, Lit activated his hush spell. He was almost certain that all the rooms were soundproof, considering the philandering style they were built for. But he wasn't the type to take chances. Well, how did it go? Floria prompted him. Mine is Theory of Combat B+, Principle of Advanced Magic B, Mage Knight A+, School points gained from daily evaluation 2,254 points. Everyone gave her a short round of applause. Thanks, but I bet I have less points than you lot, since I got only a specialization. Yeah, we almost the same. Quilla stood straight as an arrow. I got Theory of Combat B-, Principles of Advanced Magic B+, Healing A++, School points gained from daily evaluation 2,000, 382. Sadly, I still suck at the combat part of magic. Another short round of applause with a side of whistles. Sigh. Seems I'm not in the running for the top spot as a healer anymore, Uriel said with an apologetic voice.
Theory of Combat Magic B. Principles of Advanced Magic B. Warden A. Healing A. School points gained from daily evaluation 2,530 points. At least I can console myself with the extra points. He seemed really dejected. Taking out the specialization, the Archmage heir had scored 2 pluses less than a starving commoner. Don't beat yourself up, man, Liz said, patting Uriel on his back. Quilla and Floria performed outstandingly, but you are no worse in any way. Managing to score 2 A's in both your specialization of choice is no easy feat. Uriel humbly accepted the compliment, and so did the girls. Now, my only hope is I didn't just shoot me in the foot unknowingly insulting Freya, Lee thought, trying to play both sides on the fence. Luckily, she didn't seem upset. Yeah, you have done good. Mine is Theory of Combat Magic B, Principles of Advanced Magic B, Mage Knight B+, Healing A, School points gained from daily evaluation 2,420 points. That's an excellent result for someone who's the first in her family to become a magician. With no legacy or training to speak of, except a second-rate mentor. Lit said to her to lift her spirit while winking at Quilla. It meant I know that you and I got a worse start than her, but please follow my lead. But instead of winking back, she blushed and looked away, leaving Lit in a daze. You have yet to answer my question, though, Uriel said with an inquisitive look. Lit sighed, pondering if to tell them the truth or tone down his votes. After all, I am their combat magic teacher and a faster learner in advanced magic. I doubt they'll actually be surprised. And they weren't. There was no awkward pause before they started clapping and complimenting him. Uriel even took out a Laureate red from his dimension amulet. I hereby crown you king of the hill. That was to be expected, Freya said. Without you, I doubt I would have got a B in combat magic. Maybe a C, if not fail it entirely. I would have failed for sure. Quilla wasn't dejected at all while saying it. On the contrary, she was proud of her achievement. I never fought in my life, and never did much with magic besides healing. I would have surely achieved a solid C, maybe C+, but that's it, Floria shrugged. I learned a lot in these 2 months. Who knew that first magic was so useful? I'm the same as Quilla, but for different reasons, Uriel said. I was so eager to please my father that I only focus on Tier 3 magic. I always considered first magic a tool for servants. I knew nothing about it. If what you all said is true, then you should go and report it to Trask, Lit said, returning the wreath to its owner. Seeing their confused expressions at his words, he proceeded to explain. You heard Linjos. He is trying to change the system. New things are bound to have flaws and need a proper feedback to be fixed. If you share with him your doubts and struggling with the course, you'll help the system and, as a result, all other students. He won't be angry at you for being honest. More likely, you'll gain extra points. How do we know this is not a ruse for you to get even more merits at our expense? Doubt had reduced Quilla's eyes to slits. She didn't want to believe it making her look bad for his own profit, but she had learned to look out for herself. Easy. Don't mention my name." He stretched. "One of you can take credit for the lessons, for all I care. I'm not proposing this for points, but because I care for you and the academy. Without Linjos, my life here would be much harder, and I think the same stands for most of us. Another thing, try to remember what he said about accepting your limits and working to fixing them. I really think it would do you some good." Lid left the room, letting them decide without him interfering. After discussing it for a while, his words actually made a lot of sense. "I really can't make heads or tail about Lid," Uriel confessed. "Sometimes he acts normal, but when it comes down to magic and responsibilities, it seems I am talking to my father instead of a friend, always worrying about my future, me eating properly and learning my lessons." "Agreed," Freya said. "At some point, I started doubting he was only 12, so I had a background check made on him. He is really 12 and is supposed to be the youngest child of his family. Then, why do I get the impression he is—" She struggled, finding the right word. "Raising us?" Later, they decide to follow Lid's advice and report everything to Trask. He asked them a few questions about what they had found particularly hard and challenging, and how they had overcome their respective bottlenecks. "Seems a single professor is really not enough," Trask sighed. "Combat magic has the highest rate of failure among all courses. We need to fix this ASAP." "Thank you for your sincerity, guys," he said, snapping his fingers. "I just raised your grade in my class by 1 notch. I'm really proud of your growth." Meanwhile, Lid was in his room, taking a nap to catch up on his sleep. A sudden knocking woke him up, prompting many curses. He was having one of his rare good dreams. Seeing his frown, the academy's clerk apologized for the inconvenience and delivered him the new books. The first one title was "Get Out of My Face, a comprehensive guide of all you need to know about dimensional magic." The author name was Kavas Rod. Suprememagus, Chapter 94, Dimensional Magic. The following morning, Lid and Floria were taking a small walk before picking up the rest of the team for breakfast. Descending from a long line of mage knights, Floria had more experience with swords, and since she had to attend only one specialization course, she was his main teacher between the two girls. That allowed them to spend quite some time together, since both of them had free afternoons to practice swordsmanship. Actually, Floria sometimes needed to cram at night to catch up with her studies, but it was something she gladly did. She would have not given up the weekend lessons about first magic for the world. Besides, once she managed to get to know him better, she really enjoyed his company. The same went for Lid. Up to that point, she was his favorite. Floria was mature and level-headed, speaking her mind so often that sometimes she came out rude. She also had various interests and hobbies, making her able to talk about almost every topic, not only about magic or court life. Lid enjoyed their talks, learning about the New World mentality and non-written society rules. Having lived most of his new life in a small village, Lid could learn more from one of her anecdotes than from an entire book. That day, Floria wore her long black hair down, making them dance in her face every time she turned her head suddenly. "Why are you still growing your hair?" Lid asked. "I thought that having them short was more convenient for a fighter." "Yeah, you got that right. But during the last break, my mother kept nagging me about not being feminine enough. She said if I cut it even shorter, people would mistake me for a boy." "What a load of nonsense," she grumbled. Lit could only keep silent, inwardly agreeing with her mother. Floria was very tall, even more than most professors, and she still had plenty of time to grow further. She also had wide shoulders and enough strength to easily lift him, like during the mock exam. "What do you think about it?" she asked abruptly. That I hope she didn't phrase it so cruelly, but I have to give it to her that you are prettier this way. Lit dodged the question with a compliment. "Of course not. My mother is of noble origin. She would never be so straightforward. She just pointed out how hard it is to find suitors for me, adding how scared she is at the idea that our bloodline would die with me and all that." "I thought you had siblings." Lit raised an eyebrow at such arguments. He clearly remembered that her parents had 3 children. "I do," and when I pointed it out, she replied with the bogus theory that women are more likely to pass down a greater degree of magic. At that point, I gave up. You know parents. You are always on the losing side of any discussion. Lit nodded, not knowing what to say. No one had ever tried to control that aspect of his life. "While we are at it, you do know that Quilla has it bad for you, right?" Yes, he actually suspected that Quilla was developing a crush, but he hoped that with time and not giving her special attention, it would pass. He did not want to openly reject her and hurt her feelings. "Yet I don't understand why." "Well, she's an orphan. She clearly has daddy issues, and between your big brother and drill sergeant vibes, I'd say you make the ideal candidate." "But why me and not one of the professor or something? I mean, I'm nothing special, just tall, good-looking, talented, and caring." Floria cut him short. "You are right, it's complete mystery." Lit glared at her in innocence. "That's not funny. Stop ruffling my feathers." "Well, right now I have to take back the good-looking and caring part. With that face, you are creepy." Lit's expression returned to normal. "Much better. By the way, I would keep an eye on Freya too. It would not surprise me if her family sent her after you. Talented magicians with no family name are much sought after." "Please, I'm just a 4th-year student." Lit scoffed. "It's too soon for that kind of shenanigans." "Nah, you are still too naive. It's the perfect moment to start an approach to develop in the future without seeming too desperate or interested. During the 5th year would be too late. One needs an edge over the competition. It's not like they are going to make you marry after all. If you do not live up to their expectation, they can always back off at any moment." "That makes sense." Lit furrowed his brow, thinking about the unexpected problem. "Thanks for the heads up." "You're welcome. But to be honest, you should thank my father. It's only when he asked me if I would mind a younger spouse that I realized what was happening." Lit was afraid to ask the question, but he did anyway. "What did you reply to him?" "After stressing out that I don't mind a small age gap, don't get me wrong, I don't want to end up marrying someone much older than me. I said that I would consider it." No reply was the only reply. If I said yes, he would have sent my mother to make me change my mind. If I said no, he would have probably started arranging our marriage. He is kind of bullheaded. "I see." He tried to keep his poker face, but unconsciously took a step away from her. "Don't overestimate yourself, short stuff." She laughed at his move. "I am my own woman. I may bend on many things for my parents' sake, but love is not one of those. If they try to force me, I'm ready to become independent after graduation. If I keep my grades as they are, people will line up to hire me." From that point, they walked in silence until they knocked on Quilla's door. During breakfast,
Everyone expressed their curiosity about the new lessons and their professor, making bets about their looks. Lid sneaked a look at Freya from time to time, and only when he realized that nothing had changed, he managed to put his paranoia to rest. Because dimensional magic was a compulsory course, it took place in the fourth-year lecture class. As soon as the last gong rang, Professor Rudd walked in. He was a tall man, about 1.78 high, with gray streaked black hair and ice cold blue eyes. He was in his mid-50s, wearing the robe open and revealing a slim build. Aside from Professor Vaster, he was the oldest teacher Lid had ever met.
Good morning, dear students. He spoke like he had poison spitting out his mouth. I'm Professor Kavas Rod, and I'll teach you dimensional magic. As you can see, I'm not one of those hot-stuffed children that our beloved headmaster Lin just placed in the academy. I'm one of the remnants of the old guard, one of those that allegedly find a waste of resources to teach magic to those that do not belong to mage bloodlines or at least noble families. At those words, Lid, Quilla, and Freya took out their ballot, placing it on their desk. After one too many practical joke, Freya had decided to follow Quilla's advice and got her freedom back. Being noble, that speech wasn't addressed to her, but she still wanted to prove her point. Freya wasn't scared of putting herself on the line for her friends. Rude continued like he didn't see anything, despite the three of them were sitting in front lines. Even in such hypothetical scenario, though, I would still be professional, capable of leaving his prejudice outside the door. I expect you of doing the same. All the commoner students didn't believe a word he said. Many started regretting not having a guilty ballot. Dimensional magic is a complex and deep subject, so do not expect of getting rid of me after just 3 months. My class is where we will separate true mages from simple birds. Even a magical can fly, but only a mage can do this. After a quick wave of the hand, a hushed word, Ruth disappeared from the back of the class near the chalkboard, reappearing in front of the first row of students. His hands never stopped. Before they could even grasp, he had already disappeared, materializing with his feet on the second row desk, making a full round of class before returning back to the point of origin. This spell is called Blink, one of the most common battle uses of dimensional magic. It's particularly useful to battle mages and mage knights, to push forwards since they use weapons, but everyone can use it to escape in a pinch. Just to be clear, I didn't use any artifact, just my skills. If you are capable of doing this, by the end of the course, you will never pass it. The good news is that failing my class will not prevent you from graduating. Just mark your failure as mages. He smirked, looking at the student's worried face. A hand rose up from the middle row. What? I still have to begin explaining and you already have a question? I wonder how you got admitted here. Nevertheless, speak freely. Are you going to teach us teleportation? Asked the red-haired chubby boy. Professor Rudd broke out in loud laughter, full of contempt and amazement. Most of the students understood that he wasn't laughing at the question, but at the boy himself. Teleportation! I haven't heard that word in years. It's a withered branch of magic, whose only success was to get the world rid of all the idiots that practice it. Suprememagus, Chapter 95, Dimensional Magic Part 2. The idea of teleportation was first born after realizing the limitation of flying. As you all should know, it is impossible to move in such a way an army or its supplies. It's not a matter of mana required, as much that would take too much time. Not to mention it would offer a perfect target for an ambush, since non-mages would be sitting ducks. The first idea was just move a body much faster, but above a certain speed threshold, dust becomes dangerous as an arrow, insects hit like an avalanche. Adding a barrier strong enough to endure such hazards would make the mana consumption prohibitive, even for a small group of persons. So, some dumb idiot who read too many fairy tales had the idea of teleportation, as in covert living matter in something else that could sustain high-speed traveling and reverting it back once arrived to destination. Rude laughed loudly, like it was the best joke ever, but when he noticed he was the only one laughing, his upper lip curled in an expression of disgust. "How can you possibly be that dumb? Do you really not understand?" he asked without receiving any answer besides puzzled look. "In a fairy tale is great, but in reality, converting living matter into something else is just a fancy word to say killing. How can you be sure that the thing that arrives on the other side is really you? What if a part of your body, your mind, or soul gets lost? How do you think you could get it back? And more importantly, would the newborn thing even notice not to be the original? One thing is teleporting a rock, but living beings are much complicated." Interesting, Lee thought. It's the same moral conundrum theoretical physicists had about teleportation back on Earth. Someone even made a Hollywood movie about it. And don't let me get started about the necessity of having perfect coordinations. Professor Rudd continued. Rematerialize a little too high, too low, or too close to a travel companion and bam, instant death. Not to mention that the aforementioned insects, dust, and even animals are not bound to make space for your arrival. The tiniest hitch and you have a fly for brains. The last mage that attempted teleportation materialized in the sky, hoping to avoid such issues, only for a flock of ducks to cross his path, making him die like the quack he was. This time part of the class laughed at the dark humor. "What I'm going to teach you is the art of manipulating space itself, allowing you to arrive from a point A to point B in complete safety in an instant, even if two places are thousands miles away." Professor Rudd waved his hand in a circular manner, and soon two tiny black spots appeared, the first one between his palms, and the second one right in front of the girl sitting in the middle front row. With each magic word he spoke, the spots started to enlarge and stretch themselves in a specular manner. One extremity became almost circular, the size of a fist, while the other was so thin and small to be pointing-like. They assumed the shape was of a funnel, made out of energy, with both ends spinning at unbelievable speed. "Is that even horizon?" Lit was shocked, to the point of standing up to better observe the phenomenon. After just a second, the energy funnels had collapsed on themselves, leaving in their places two rifts in space. Professor Rudd extended his hand inside the first rift, making it appear right above the girl's desk, taking the pen away from her fingers. "Do you understand now? Bending space requires the same amount of energy and focus than teleportation would, but it's infinitely safer. Walking through a gate is like going through a door. What gets in, gets out, no more and no less. But not to get fooled by appearance. Even a simple trick like the one I just showed you has many limitations. First of all, it requires a clear line of sight. Otherwise, one cannot have a clear focus of the entry and exit points. Secondly, even a small gate requires at least the ability to triple cast, since you have to mix and control the energy of earth, air, and magic water. Those are the most basic elements for a gate. Adding more elements allow to create bigger rifts, and it's the only way to make them stable enough to let more than one person walk through it. You will need to develop a deep understanding of these three elements, just for starters. Despite what you may think, dimensional magic does not require enormous amount of mana, like some specializations do. The most important requirement is sensibility to small fluctuation of energy and space. It's not something that you can brute force your way through. You must be able to feel the gate growing and adapt to its changes. If you don't feed it mana at the right time in the right place, it will never open. Dimensional magic is not a specialization. It has no strict requirements that cannot be overcome with practice and hard work. On paper is something that every good mage can do, even those with one specialization or none at all. Tomorrow we will start with nothing more than a simple parlor trick. Should open two small portals barely the size of a coin, one above the other. Then he dropped a small pebble in the lower portal and it reappeared from the upper one, falling down in the lower portal in an endless loop. Forewarned is forearmed. Better if you start reading your book from today onward, if you don't want to start with the wrong foot. Questions? Uriel raised his hand, receiving permission to speak. Professor, you said that teleportation does not exist. But what was Blink then? I didn't see any gate opening. Excellent question, young man. For the first time he had entered the room, Professor Rudd smiled kindly. Many were cursing inwardly, asking themselves if the question was really good, or rather he was appreciating Uriel's father. Dimensional magic is not just a matter of logistic and transportation. It's the right condition. Is also a perfect tool to defend or attack. But in such scenario, you cannot expect the enemy to be kind enough to wait for you to finish. Everything needs to be fast. Allow me to show you Blink again, this time slowly. The Academy ring of Ruth's finger tapped into the castle magic, opening two portals, one in front of the professor and the other in the middle of the class. But, unlike Warp Step, where both ends were, the portal in front of Ruth moved forward, making him arrive to destination without having to take a step. That's how Blink works, just much faster. Using a dimensional magic in combat is the final test of skill for a mage. Another useful but even harder application is the following. Please stand up, young man. Uriel did as instructed, but as soon as he stood up, he found himself watching Professor Rudd standing behind his desk, while he was now in the middle of the room. This spell is called Switch. The name is self-explanatory and requires two sets of portals that is correctly timed create the perfect diversion, sometimes even an opportunity to kill. Back in my days, I once found myself surrounded by archers using enchanted arrows. Their commander did me the favor of standing still long enough for me to time switch so that while I was running away, he had become a fine spill cushion. A cruel smile appeared on Ruth's face, remembering the shocked expression of the soldiers when they realized what had happened. But don't get me wrong, switch is even harder to pull off than blink. It requires that both targets are still within a 10 meters distance and a clear visual. But I digress. Anything further? Is it really possible for a single mage to open a gate to a location hundreds, if not thousands of miles away? Asked a petite girl. Yes and no. A single mage can open a portal leading to a very further destination, but he needs to have either enough mana to support the task or a magical item to share its burden. Also, one cannot go in a location he has never been before. Visualization is a key element, and so is the knowledge of the exact coordination. Moreover, opening such a gate requires a focus, something like this. From his dimensional amulet, Professor Root took out a small sphere with many arcane red runes engraved on it. Dimensional mages usually plant magical beacons in their most common destination, making the opening of a portal much easier and less mana consuming. As I said at the beginning of the lesson, my subject is really complex. It's better to avoid filling your heads with useless notions. Focus at the task at hand. One must first learn how to crawl, then to walk, and only then can worry about his running speed. Dismissed. Almost at the same moment, the gong signaling the end of the lesson resounded. Many students had worried looks on their faces, and Lit was one of them. This is really bad. Not only I have never practiced anything like this, but sensibility is not exactly my strong point. Whenever I encountered a difficulty, I either cheated my way in with true magic until I understood the true core of the problem, or relied on fake magic autopilot to understand the magic's flow. What's the average success rate per year for this course? According to the Academy's records, it's less than 60%, Solus replied. How many graduated students manage to score an A despite failing it? Lit was considering dropping the subject to avoid it affecting his grades. He could always copy the book and study at his own pace later. None. The answer left him dejected. Turn that frown upside down. Even the most experienced kid here has barely 6 years of magic practice. You have more than 12. Not to mention the hex casting and true magic. I know, but practice is not all. This seems a discipline that requires quite a lot of talent, and we both know I'm no genius. Invigoration and true magic cannot help me like they do for forge mastering and healing. I'm afraid I have just hit a wall. Chapter 96 True Genius Worries. After dimensional magic, it was time for the specialization lesson. Professor Naliar's course was on forced hold. The numbers of students required Tier 4 spell and evaluation had far exceeded expectation. A day hadn't been enough. Floria had the rest of the morning free, while Lit and the others went to the Master Healer class. Once at the Academy's hospital, the students discovered that Professor Vester had organized a small refreshment before officially starting the new trimester. The class had gone down from 34 to 28 students, and some of them had barely broke a C. Between those who had lost a friend and the ones terrified at the idea of suffering the same fate, very few were in the mood for celebration. Vaster didn't seem to notice, though And even if the report cards were supposed to be a secret, it wasn't hard to guess grades based on how he treated the different students. He devoted a lot of attention to Quilla and Lit, arousing the envy of many. Those who, like Professor Rudd, were biased against commoners' bloodlines would have given an arm and a leg to get the opportunity to teach them a lesson. Yet, they were well aware that because of the ballots, the best they could do was get demoted from unsuccessful mages to expelled ones, not to mention that instead of being reprimanded, Vaster had received an award for beating unruly students during the mock exam. Keep working hard, my dear pupils, and remember what I said at the beginning of our lessons. After the second trimester, the class will be halved. We will be lucky if 20 of you manage to actually graduate as healers. From how he was looking at the angered students, he had got a taste for it. During the lessons, Lit group had finally the opportunity to take the lead in delicate procedures like regrowing lost limbs and organs. Previously, the three-man team, one responsible for the regeneration and the other for keeping the patient's vitals stable, were both comprised of 2 professors and only 1 student. Now, the balance had shifted, and only a professor remained in each team. When Quilla and Lit weren't in charge of one of the teams, Professor Vaster would always put them as second in command, ready to take over the procedure in case anything went wrong. It took Lit a few patients to understand all the quirks and risk of generating a lost limb. The Tier 4 spell couldn't be handled by just mindlessly pumping mana, or everyone could have done it, even without a specialization. The whole process revolved around a delicate balance between the 2 groups of healers, with the patients as their fulcrum. The mage leading the regeneration had to keep the spell active, while giving the patient's body time to rejuvenate. With 2 short intervals between mana pulses, most of their effectiveness would be lost, making the procedure longer and more difficult. Also, it would put a great stress on the patient's body with the risk that the new limb would be defective. One had to give the vital support team the time to reintegrate the patient's lost vitality during the process, his metabolism as little as possible. The second team acted as a life force, but the drip rate had to be manually adjusted depending on the circumstances. Too fast, and the energy would be lost, just giving a sensation of euphoria. Too slow, and the massive drain caused by the regeneration could kill or permanently incapacitate it. The team had to coordinate between themselves, the first sending mana pulses spaced enough to allow the life force infusion to be effective, the second adjusting the flow whenever was necessary, to avoid the regenerative spell to be interrupted by a too prolonged pause. Lit and Quilla quickly mastered both roles, receiving many compliments from the medical staff and 30 points from Professor Vaster. They were the only ones that, despite occasionally losing control of the spell, would manage to fix things on their own without needing a professor to take over. In Lit's case, he did it on purpose. Thanks to invigoration, he was capable of having complete awareness of the patient status. Lit could understand with a glance when more life force was necessary or not, instructing the other team to speed up or slow down and time the regenerating pulse so that the next one would arrive only when the previous was already losing effectiveness. Yet, he had to make mistakes. Achieving perfection from day one would have been too eye-catching. Even with the help of true magic, the task took a heavy toll on both his mind and body. The stress of handling a human life put a huge pressure on everyone. The patients were real person and not test dummies anymore. Because of the long pre-operation phase, the student had been forced to spend time with them during the previous semester, to talk and know them personally. It was impossible to consider their life just a number in their success-failure ratio. and while it used invigoration, the others could only rely on their magic sensitivity, listening to the patient's pulse and keeping an eye on their complexion and pain. It was something incredibly hard. Lid had no idea how others could manage to do it. The scariest thing was that despite all that, Willa was just a few steps behind him. Even if stuck with fake magic, she was able to absorb like a sponge all the notions and suggestions Professor Buster gave them, managing to get in tune with every patient. Lid would have never been capable of doing that, at least not that fast. He learned by experience, little by little with every procedure, using invigoration as a guiding hand whenever he had a doubt. The more time they spent together, the more aware he was that it was only a matter of time before she revealed herself to be a genius. Her manacore was already on par with Lid's. I can only pat myself in the back for taking care of her for all this time. If necessity ever arises, she can become an invaluable asset. If she really is an S-class healer, she'll relieve me of all the unnecessary attentions, avoiding for a simple A-class talent like me to be pressured. Besides, it's not like she can treat in my position. With my knowledge of biochemistry, biology, and anatomy, I will always be the top of the theoretical field. Who would ever guess that all the extra credits, seminars for the college would pay off like this? All the other students didn't know if to laugh or cry at their helplessness. Envy and shame fought in their hearts, like two lions tumbling down a cliff. No matter which one would win, the result would be the same. Even Uriel and Freya felt a tinge of jealousy while comparing themselves to them, but most of all, they were proud and happy for their friends. Lid had helped them countless times in the past, never asking anything in return. What had started as a simple business relationship had evolved in honest friendship. As for Quilla, they could never resent her. At first, Uriel approached her just out of curiosity. He had considered her like a pet, someone talented that would be easy to manipulate due to her childish naivety and poor background. But Quilla's growth as a person and mage had stunned him, leading Uriel to shed his prejudice and accept her as a peer. Now, after 3 months together, he felt deeply ashamed of his initial attitude towards her and was trying to make amends. Freya, instead, liked to think of her as her little sister she had always wanted. Quilla was honest and had a big heart. Their friendship had developed naturally from their first meeting, both suffering from the constant harassing from the other students. Quilla's body had started to change due to the rapid growth induced by the tonic. Freya had helped her manage her first period, teaching her everything about what being a woman meant, becoming her confidant. When Freya had hit a wall during the healer specialization, Quilla had volunteered to help her. They started studying together, and whatever difficulty Freya encountered, Quilla had been always there for her. She had never talked about her private lessons to anyone, not even trying to impress Lid, from whom Freya knew she had a huge crush. Quilla's humble and gentle nature had moved her beyond what words could express. Freya had found in a stranger something that even her own family had always denied her. She was ready to do anything for her little adoptive sister. As for Quilla, she was thankful for Tier 4 magic being so hard. Her work as a healer, with the constant pressure of having another human being in her hands, was the only thing forcing her unruly heart to rest. When they had first met, Uriel was like a prince charming out of the fairy tales that she had read as a kid. He was noble, powerful, rich, handsome, smart, and gentle, almost too good to be true. Lid, on the other side, had been more like a demon lord, cold, scary, brash, talking to everyone like they were ants, glaring with soul-chilling dead eyes. But after the 2 days, something had changed. She had noticed how indifferent Uriel actually was, sometimes even forgetting about her existence. Freya was the one actually caring for her, while it was complicated. When the first magic private lesson had started, he had lost most of his edge, becoming more supportive and helpful than Professor Trask himself. He was the only one now staring at her for the amount of food she gobbled every day. On the contrary, he would even encourage her to eat more and help her keep her diet balanced. Lid would always worry for her safety, encouraging her to pick up a ballot, even defending her when she still had to get her own. In the last months, whenever students tried to casually bump into her, Lid would switch places with Quilla. No matter how big the other guy was, Lid would remain immovable like a mountain, while the other would fall on his ass, wincing in pain. After a month from their first meeting, when she had her first period, he had been the one noticing her distress, relieving the pain with one of his personal spells, and bringing her to Freya to give her some help. As a healer, he was bound to know everything about it too, yet he had the sensitivity to avoid embarrassing her, letting another woman help her face that awkward situation. It was after that moment that something inside Quilla had changed. Whenever she saw him, she would get butterflies in her stomach, her mouth would go dry. Each time they spoke, she needed sheer willpower to not speak fast or giggle at everything he said. Over time, he had become gentler and kinder, helping them whenever he could during the private lessons, answering all their questions and giving them pointers. She started to admire his cold attitude towards strangers, not giving a damn about what they thought or said, having eyes only for his friends. Lid soon revealed to be wise beyond his years, knowing many things and having anecdotes about almost everything. Sometimes, when they walked side by side, their hands casually touched. In those moments, she felt really hard to resist the compulsion to take his hand, to feel his warmth. Other times, when she was alone in her room, her mind would go crazy with fantasies and delusions, making her feeling hot and fuzzy in the strangest places. When Quilla talked about that to Freya, she told her that it was perfectly normal, even though she blushed listening to the question. When Freya explained what it meant, Quilla thought she would die of embarrassment. Luckily, there were just the two of them, and she knew that she could trust her friend. Over time, she had learned to manage her feelings, mostly because she was too scared to do anything about them, except that towards Professor Nelliar, Lid seemed to be completely uninterested in girls. Quilla was conscious that even if thanks to the tonic she was now 1.5 meters tall, she was nothing special. Her figure was still undeveloped and very childish. She lacked Freya's curves or Floria's innate charisma. The only thing she could do was stay strong and hope for her feelings to fade away. Chapter 97. Just a warning. After the end of lesson, the group went to lunch, finding Floria waiting for them at their usual table. I seriously think I have overestimated myself, thinking to be able keeping my nice guy facade for 2 whole years. If it wasn't for my big brother instinct, I don't know how many times I would have snapped already. I really don't get these guys at all. To make things worse, no matter how much I force myself, I keep feeling I don't belong with them. Lid inwardly sigh. Solus had no idea what to say to make him feel better. Returning to the academy right after spending some time with the people he loved had made Lid depressed. "Hey guys, how was your lesson?" Floria asked. Same old, Uriel shrugged. Vaster keep pushing forward those who are good and spread salt on the wounds of those who aren't. And while the class struggles with each task, these two monsters keep running circles around us mortals. How did your morning go? Lee tried changing topic. Ever since his encounter with the Scorpicore, Every time someone called him monster, he could not help but shudder. He had realized that calling what happened to him reincarnation was far from correct. He was more like an evil spirit from a horror movie possessing the bodies of the recently deceased. Depressingly so. After Professor Rudd's speech, I was eager to check if his subject is really as hard as he says. Well, he lied. It's much worse than I thought. I spent the last 2 days trying the parlor trick we are supposed to perform tomorrow. I read his book over and over, but I didn't succeed, not even once. She sighed. Are you serious? Free asked. We have passed the first part of Professor Nallier's course. Could it be that the spell requires something that she has yet to cover in her lessons? Everyone at the table turned gloomy. 2 hours were the regular duration of a class. Floria failing so badly was unprecedented, not to mention a bad omen. If she wasn't able, it was unlikely that any of them could succeed. Even Lit was on the same boat. Without true magic or invigorations as scratches, he wasn't much better than them. Solus, what is the average time for succeeding in the pebble trick? More bad news, she replied. The school records are not helping this time. The only thing reported is the number of lessons for opening a gate. Lessons? Not hours? This is worse than I thought. How many for genius and how many for regular students? Geniuses usually need around 3 lessons. The others around 20. Lit almost choked himself on bread when he heard that piece of news. Normally, I'd propose to gobble up our lunch fast and go practice dimensional magic. Do not let that old coot embarrass us, Freya said. But Floria and I have yet to take our mage night class for today. Same, I have forge mastering later. What about we meet at Quilla's place after the end of the lesson? Uriel proposed. I bet that with her learning speed, by the time we get there, she will be able to teach us the basics. That afternoon, much to his disappointment, Professor Wainwright went back to theory lessons. In the first trimester, they had learned how to infuse a single enchantment in an object. The topic of the new lesson was how to mix 2 enchantments together, introducing a new set of runes and magic circles whose complexity was on all another level. He was eager to get back in the lab and put them to test. Because of Soluspedia, when it wasn't involved fine mana control or a particular timing in manipulating volatile energies, such lessons were just redundant for him. He already knew every rune and circle, so he spent most of the lessons practicing how to draw them perfectly instead of listening. The second forge mastering tome was a gold mine of inspiration for Lit. Meanwhile, Uriel was diligently taking notes about the arrays Professor Timon was introducing. A warden had a supportive role. He couldn't cast random spells like most mages. It was important to understand in what circumstances a magic formation would do more good than harm. Since the Griffon kingdom was at peace, Uriel had chosen such specialization, hoping to help the development of his family's fief. His wish was to become able to build dams, bridges, and roads almost by himself, saving the money to hire more healers and teachers. One of his great-grandmother's teachings was that without its people, a country was just a piece of land. The new arrays were even more difficult to perform and hard to control than those of the first trimester. But at least the casting speed was the same. The biggest flaw of a warden was the long time necessary for a single spell. After the lesson, he was about to leave when he was approached by an old acquaintance. It was Liam Lockhart, the military-looking guy that looked humiliated during Trask's second lesson. Uriel knew him because he was the son of Archmage Lockhart. They had started the academy together 3 years prior, but had quickly parted ways. The Lockhart family was one of the oldest magicians' bloodlines and were pretty stuck up about that. Despite their fathers holding the same status, Liam had never treated Uriel as a peer, let alone a friend. Following his family's teachings, he considered the Darius household a branch family at best. Having centuries of mystic legacy, a household with only 3 generations of mages was too young to be considered a real magical bloodline. Liam demanded blind respect and loyalty from those he deemed inferior. The Darius household instead didn't give a damn about tradition, respecting only talent and achievements. Uriel couldn't bear Liam's groundless arrogance, so after a while he had politely but firmly put a distance between them. "Darius, do you have a minute?" Liam asked. Uriel put his best smile, trying to cut that conversation short. Calling Uriel by his last name was a polite way to underline their difference in status. Whatever Liam wanted, he wasn't willing to give. "Not really, Liam. Dimensional magic seems really hard. I'm in a hurry to practice for tomorrow's lessons." Refusing his request was usually enough. For someone like Liam, having to ask twice was akin to begging. "Then let me accompany you for a while. I promise it will not take long." Uriel was so flabbergasted that for a second he lost his composure, but was quick to recover. He nodded, prompting the other to continue. "You have been here as long as I have. What do you think of all the changes Linjos introduced?" The question was odd, but Uriel had no reason to lie or refuse to answer. "Honestly, I don't know what to think. No finals, that terrifying mock exam, the new professors, and their scoring system. It's too soon to judge his performance, but I must admit that so far things have become more interesting." That clearly wasn't the answer Liam hoped to hear. His upper lip curled up in an expression of disgust. Without even trying to hide his feelings. "I get your point," he sighed. "Tradition have value only for those who contribute crafting it and live by it. But you see, many people feel differently about what's happening. First, the seed of a bad apple got accepted to one of the 6 big academies, then an outstanding member of the Magical Society, like Headmaster Linnea, had lost everything in the name of diversity, just to quench the thirst for revenge of social climbers that got too close to the Queen's ear. And now the prestigious White Griffon gets rid of its history, treating it as garbage, abolishing finals in favor of this farce of a grading system." Liam spat on the floor, uncaring of the disgusted looks people threw at him. Yet his voice was calm and collected. Uriel doubted that anyone beside him could hear anything. "Many people, both at court and Mage Association, are not pleased with the course of these events. They would like the Queen to reconsider her decisions, taking her time to properly reflect before doing something this drastic." Uriel knew there was little if no trust between them. And now Liam was being subtle, making no names. What all this have to do with me? Well, something that all magical bloodlines should stick together and try to correct the situation. People like Linjos need to be put back in their place, and for that, I'd like your help. I'm not going to hurt my friends, Uriel angrily retorted, nor am I going to let anyone harm them. His hostility only meant an amused laughter. Your friends? Is what you think this is all about? No one cares who do you pick as a boot boy or what kind of wench you prefer for warming your bed. To each his own. Everyone has his eccentricities. No one will touch your servants. There is no need to. What we want is to get rid of Linjos, to prove that all these so-called changes do nothing but let weeds proliferate while real talents get smothered in the crib. I came to you today because I need you to persuade your father to join our cause. Good luck with that, Uriel managed to say. Do whatever you want, but leave me out of this. Be it the old or the new system is none of my business. He didn't know if to report everything to Headmaster, but he wasn't stupid enough to reveal his intentions. Keeping a neutral stand while deciding what to do was the best course of action. That's unfortunate. Liam clicked his tongue. I really hoped you would come to your senses. Picking the wrong path in life can have terrible consequences. Uriel looked around, noticing that the corridor was empty. No one was around anymore. Only the two of them remained. Before he could demand for an explanation, Liam punched him in the stomach, following with a hook to the chin that sent Uriel to the ground. Suddenly, several people joining the beating, carefully avoiding to hit his face or vitals. While trying to protect himself, Uriel recognized some of them, all heirs of powerful nobles or ancient magical bloodlines. The good thing about stupidity is that up to a certain degree it can be beaten out. Even dumb dogs learn their lesson with the proper training. Liam kneeled using a powerful Tier 3 healing spell on Uriel to leave no trace of the brutal aggression. The pain, though, was still there. Uriel needed all his willpower to not give them the satisfaction of begging to stop or screaming in agony. He hadn't made a sound the whole time. Tell your father that this was just a warning. We can't wait to have a proper talk with him too. Chapter 98 Failures. When someone heard referring to the king's council chamber, usually his mind would think of the throne room. More than 20 meters long and over 10 meters large. A single red silk carpet with gold embroidered edges going from the 3 meters wide double doors up to the 2 steps that distanced the floor where the nobles stood and the raised one for the royal family. That way, even sitting on their gold thrones, carved to resemble a rampant griffon, they would be able to look down on everyone present, reaffirming their status and authority. The whole room was lit by crystal chandeliers, fueled by magic, leaving no space for shadows or need for maintenance. On the walls, magically enchanted tapestries would recount over and over the great feats that the current king had accomplished to be deemed worthy of his power. Both the floor and the pillars of the room were realized from gold veined marble that the most precious and robust material available in the Griffin kingdom, and that someone would be dead wrong. The throne room was perfect for holding social events or awarding a special general or noble. But when it came down to state secrets, it was a security nightmare. Between the main entrance, the servants' passages, the secret passages, and the balconies for the spectators circling around the room, a small army of spies could easily go unnoticed even after searching the whole place with a tooth comb. The real council chamber was located in the king's private apartments, inside of a heavily guarded tower. The room was about 6 feet long and 4 meters large, with only a round table and wooden chairs as furniture. The round table didn't mean that every opinion held the same importance. It was simply the only way to be heard from every side of the room without the need of shouting non-stop. Aside from the furniture, the room was bare, with no windows and only one entrance. Both the floors and the walls were of a pale gray. There was no color outside that of the magical stones the room was made of. Most of the assemblies would last hours, and given the sensitive nature of the subjects that required the king's direct approval, discretion was of vital importance. The whole place was enchanted to prevent eavesdropping either by conventional or magical means, not to mention all the protection necessary to avoid the whole high command getting killed in one fell swoop. In that particular day, the council chamber wasn't occupied by ministers or generals, but by upper echelons of the Mage Association. In such occasions, it was the Queen's duty chairing the debate. For the Crown to have absolute control over both political and magical matters, responsibilities were shared as such. The one of the royal couple most versed in the magical arts would become the head of the Mage Association. The other would be in charge of all the military power and oversee the minister activities. Together they will hold all the keys to the kingdom. Queen Sylpha wore a simple blue satin morning dress, with long sleeves covering her arms. Despite being over 50 years old, it was hard thinking her a day past 30. With her square chin and sharp features, she couldn't be considered beautiful, but the aura of confidence and power she exuded, coupled with her perfect manners, still made her quite charming. Your Majesty, we still cannot find Linnea, said a bold middle-aged man with a grey goatee. We are certain she hasn't crossed the borders yet. She would never leave her children behind. The Queen dilated her nostrils in annoyance. Recently, she would only receive bad news. And I want results, not hypotheses. If you can't find her, she could have defected to the Blood Sand tribes, or even hiding up my powered ass for all I care. What about the Gorgon Empire? Is it true that they are developing clairvoyance magic? The idea of their worst enemy being able to spy on them from a safe distance caused the Queen to lose sleep over it. Yes and no, sniggered an old woman with long white hair held up in a ponytail. Yes, they spent thousands of gold coins to indulge the emperor's obsession with profits, seers, and all that about predicting the future. No, because up to date all those so-called mediums were only frauds. Some of them were actually our agents that managed to drain considerable sums before disappearing. Finally, something goes right. She slammed the table with her fist hard enough to make several goblets fall off. What about the great academies? An awkward silence fell into the room, instantly ruining her good mood. Your Majesty, maybe you should reconsider your line of actions, said a tall middle-aged woman with short red hair. So many changes at once are hard to accept. It would be better to implement them one by one over time. One by one over time, the queen echoed, drumming with her slender fingers on the armrest. Tell me, dear Bolna, how long has the Mage Association tried to change the rules nice and easy to avoid unrest? Her tone was calm and amiable, causing those present to shudder. The queen was many things, but amiable was none of those. As any purebred politician, she was capable of hiding her emotions and thoughts whenever it was necessary, but her true nature was that of a fiery woman, passionate in everything she did. When speaking about state's affairs with her counselors, she would not mince words or waste time with niceties. Her being calm meant that the storm was incoming. Over 40 years, the woman swallowed a lump of saliva, forcing herself to answer without trembling. Even before my crowning, yes. And how many rules have been actually changed until now? None. Last question. How many potential magi did we lose during all this time? Her voice had turned stone cold. At least 4. Incapable of returning the queen's gaze, Bolna lowered her eyes. All of them defected, swearing an oath of vengeance. Let me get this straight. The queen pulled back her chair, standing up. She was a woman of average stature, 1.62 meters high, with slender build. Despite being held up in a chinion, the long black hair still revealed her uncanny gift for the mythical arts, with all the 6 shades of colors making her as blessed by all the gods of magic. We lost 4 one-man armies for nothing but pretty grudges, and your great idea is to keep up with the good work? The queen moved so fast that one could think she had blinked, but the blur behind her told a different story. She had simply walked. Do you think that when the god of death returns from the blood desert leading the army of undead that he has been raising for all this time, will he take revenge bit by bit over time, or just slaughter us all? Silpha said while lifting her by the neck with only one hand. Despite Bolna being taller and double her weight, none dared to interfere. All of those present were powerful archmages, but there was a reason for Silpha being the queen. She was capable of casting several spells with barely any delay, moving faster than a wild beast and ripping in half a fully armed knight with her bare hands. Many suspected she was actually a dragon in human form, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result is the very definition of madness. She brought Bolna's purple face near her own. Your master should have trained you better. Silpha clenched her fist, producing a snap, before throwing the body in a corner of the room. Bolna's head was now tilted at a natural angle. Her limbs sprawled under the heavy magician robe. Now that we got rid of the spy among our ranks, we shouldn't lose so many agents anymore, she said, returning to her chair. Bolna was a spy? Everyone was shocked at the news, questioning and discussing what had just happened. Yes, she was. The queen rubbed her forehead with a sad expression. She looked tired and thin, with no trace of her previous vigor. The old families have their men and women planted everywhere. Academies, court, even the Mage Association is not outside their grasp. They know I invested too much money and energies in the White Griffon. If my project fails, it will be only on me. I would be left with no choice but leave everything as it is, hoping that my successor will have better skill and luck. I may even be forced to resign as the head of the Mage Association and leave the position to one of my children. I already have too many failures on my shoulders, another one of such significance, and my authority and role would be greatly diminished. Even I would question my competence. The Queen's aide didn't know what to say, so they waited in silence for her to recover. Bolna's reports were all fake. The unrest is growing. Many took their children failing grades or being expelled as personal attacks. They can't stand any more not being in control. She took out several folders from a dimensional ring, passing them to the world wizards, for them to see with their own eyes how dire the situation was. According to the documents and the transcribed conversations, the kingdom was on the verge of a civil war. The new nobles, those who had risen in status thanks to their talent and achievements, be them of military or magical nature, weren't willing any more to live their lives under the heel of an unfair system. The old nobles, instead, felt their position threatened and feared losing some of their privileges, or even worse, being forced to share resources that up to that point had been their exclusive. The two factions were now too close in numbers and power. It was only a matter of time before the old balance crumbled. I know that despite being loyal to the crown, many of you do not really support my idea. Silpha sighed. But I need you to understand how much is it at stake. No matter what your personal beliefs are, if the White Griffon turns out to be just another failure, we'll have a generation at best before the kingdom plunges into chaos. Chapter 99 Information. After finishing the lessons, everyone was in Quilla's room, waiting for Uriel to begin practicing dimensional math. Lid was very nervous, tapping with his foot while counting the seconds. Where the heck is he? He grumbled. We have been waiting for him for... Lid realized that without the sun, he had no idea how much time had passed. Barely 10 minutes. Solo's mind rolled her eyes at his impatience. Over 10 minutes? It doesn't take that long to fly over here. Maybe we should start on our own. Why so anxious? Don't tell me that you let that rod guy get under your skin. Freya mocked him playfully. He can believe whatever he wants, as long as he judges the students semi-fairly. It's fine by me. I don't fear the professor as much as his subject. It's nothing like I ever done before, and I will not relax until I know I can do it. It's the same for all of us. Yet you are the only one freaking out. Do you know why? Because you are all a bunch of children that still believe in unicorns and rainbows. In real life, only results matter. No one cares for the reason why you failed or succeed. The magical power of friendship has never solved anything unless in works of fiction. Because despite all your talent, you are so single-minded on a task at hand to become obsessive. 10 minutes aren't going to affect our chances with dimensional magic. Try to relax. Sometimes one has to stop and smell the roses. Who knows? Maybe he has met someone special. I mean, any other guy I know would be delighted to be in your place, surrounded by girls. Yet you just nag all the time like my grandpa. Lit didn't miss her poking Twilla's back, probably to encourage her to say something instead of staring at her own toes. She had been awfully silent since he had entered her room. It's not like there's something embarrassing around. This place is as empty as mine. I wonder if I was so awkward at her age too. Despite she really wanted to join the conversation, Solus kept silent. Having access to all of his memory, she knew that the 12-year-old Derek past was better forgotten. There was only pain and misery there. I am flattered by your feelings, Lit replied. But it's better if we stay friends. It's not you, it's me. Freya was left speechless, while Floria was rolling on the bed laughing. Knocked down after the first move. You better stay down, sister. Before Freya could scold the two of them, they heard knocking on the door. Lit quickly opened it, eager to begin, letting a groggy Uriel walk inside. He was leaning on the wall just to stand on his feet. His eyes were semi-closed, like he was about to fall asleep any moment. Are you drunk? It was the only explanation he could find. Uriel shook his head, while it helped him reach the bed. He clearly needed to sit down. While the other girls started worrying, asking him what was wrong. Krilla used one of her personal diagnostic spells, finding that he was perfectly fine, just like Lit did with invigoration while supporting him. He is not drunk, she said. For some reason, Uriel had barely the strength to walk. I can easily fix that. By using a Tier 4 light spell, Lit gave him some of his life force. Uriel finally managed to speak, telling them what had happened, down to the last detail. That bastard beat me so hard that the healing spell drained all my remaining energy. I had to fight just to put one foot in front of the other. It's a miracle I managed to get here without fainting. What a scheming son of a swine! Floria snapped. By healing you, not only he covered his tracks, but also left you so weak that even if you managed to call for help, it would have been too late. He can be anywhere at this point. Yeah, I need to inform my father of what happened. If I were you, I'd do the same. You come from a magic bloodline too. I'm surprised they didn't try to recruit you already. Maybe they did, Freya suddenly realized. Do you remember the cute guy that seemed wanting to talk with you, but walked away as soon as he noticed we were together? The one we joke about being too afraid to confess in public? Yes, I do. But what makes you think he was one of them? Nothing. Just that it seems too odd to be a coincidence. We have attended the same classes for months, and he chooses today to make his big move? Also, was he afraid of me or my ballot? Everyone knows I have one. It makes sense, Uriel nodded. I think at this point it's better if we all get one. Our family's names makes us targets. It could happen to you too, Priya. Contact your mother and see where she stands in this matter. Lid was shocked, contemplating all the possible consequences. It was ironic how he and Quilla were the least affected from the sudden turn of events. Being commoners, they had no value in a political struggle, at least for the moment. If they really wanted to hurt Linjo's reputation, their existence as top students of the Master Healer class would make them targets too, sooner or later. The other class wasn't a problem. They were better forge masters than he, or at least it was that he had made them believe. Freya, Floria, and Uriel took out their communicator amulets to inform their parents of the current predicament. Mind if I use the bathroom? Lid asked. In a world where underwear did not exist and the uniform was the only dress they wore, it was unlikely there was something embarrassing lying around. But he wanted to make sure to not invade her privacy. Willa nodded. After entering Lid, used his hush spell to prevent being heard before calling Marchioness Distar. Despite answering immediately, she seemed annoyed by the call, but as soon as she heard the news, her attitude changed. Good gods, those bastards! Dare to involve their own sons! This is even worse than I thought. I'm sorry, your ladyship, but you do not seem surprised at all. Can you please tell me what's happening exactly? Marchioness Distar drummed her fingers on the desk for a while before answering. What happened today is just a sideshow of the real struggle. It goes on from decades, with new powers demanding more equality and the old ones fighting to keep things as they are. Every year, commoners rise to the status of nobles thanks to magical or military achievements. But getting lands and titles mean nothing if bureaucracy stands in your way at every step. Kings come and go, but paper pushers are forever. Over the centuries, all such positions have been taken over by the old powers, and they use it as a bottleneck to others' authority. No one gets anything unless they agree, and that made many people angry. In a way, they can even overrule the court's orders simply by delaying everything as much as they can. So the court has started to replace bureaucrats, and that also made many people angry. The conflict between old and new powers keeps escalating, despite all the attempts of mediation. Why do you think my family is under a constant death threat? Because in my marquisate there is not one, but two of the 6 great academies, and there are key points in the balance of power. Both factions want me dead, hoping to take my place and further develop their agenda. Both of them? Then what side are you on? Lid asked in confusion. The court sides. I believe in compromises. Radical changes lead to chaos on the short term, and the neighboring countries would exploit the opportunity to invade us. No changes instead mean the collapse of the system. If, no matter how powerful you are or how much you contribute to your country, you do not get a proper reward, then you have no reason to remain loyal, not when other countries work much better. That's why so many defect. But what does this mean for me and my family? Are we safe? He had little to no interest towards political struggle, unless they involved Lark. Yes, you should be. Believe me, very little can get past the Queen's corpse, and in the scheme of things you are insignificant. No offense, none taken. Leeds sighed with relief. This is not the first attempt to sabotage. Linjos knows what to do. I let him know everything. So stay away from his office and don't draw attention on yourself. Stay out of it as long as you can, but keep me updated if anything else happens. He promptly agreed. If this goes on for so long, then I just need it to last a bit longer. In less than 2 years from now is none of my business anymore. Chapter 100 Family Matters. When Liz spoke with the Marchioness, everyone was having a conversation with their respective families, deciding how to face the incoming storm. Everyone but Quilla, of course. She had no relatives, hence she never spent pressure points for a communication amulet. Yet it was the second time already she was considering getting one. The first time had been during the 4 days break. While the others had returned to their homes, she had remained in the academy. Even in her old village she had always been surrounded by people. The bustling noise of her daily activities had become part of her life. But during the break she had no lessons to attend, nowhere to go, and no one to talk to. Ever since Quilla had got her ballot, she had become an outcast. But she never really noticed it up until that point. She would always spend so much time with her friends that being alone once in a while was actually pleasant. During those 4 days, though, the silence had started to scare her. Walking along the empty corridors, Quilla felt like she was traveling through the belly of a giant dead beast with only her steps echo to keep her company. Being apart from Uriel or Floria was meh, while from Lid was actually good. It gave her the time to sort her feelings. The emotional roller coaster she went through every time they met was so frustrating that more than once she almost confessed, just to get rid of the uneasiness, until the fear of being rejected kicked in, making her thank the gods for stopping her. What she really missed was Freya's company. She didn't know if Lid was her first love or just a crush. She never had experienced anything like that before. What she did know was that Freya was the closest thing to a family she had ever had. They would spend hours together, not only for studying, but also talking about their dreams and hopes once they graduated from the academy. She would listen to all the stupid little things that crossed her mind, her fears and anxiety, and never judge her for that. And now, seeing them talking to their parents gave her a sense of estrangement. I know it's stupid, but maybe if I had one too, if I could call them whenever I want, I wouldn't feel so different, she thought. Velendaris, Uriel's father, was so outraged that his eyes almost popped out. That Lockhart scum! How dares treating my son like a dog! I was willing to remain on the sidelines to see from which side we could profit the most. But this blatant lack of respect shows that if those old farts have it their way, there will be no future for us but servitude. What do you want me to do, father? Tell Linjos what happened. Get the ballot, and then wait for my instructions. Don't try to get revenge. If he is smart, Liam has a ballot too. That little act was probably meant to either make you submit or anger you enough to retaliate and get you expelled. Trying to recruit you like that makes no sense. unless they wanted to make us an example for the young magical families, to show that they can reach us both on the inside and the outside. Would be a good plan if we were some stuck-up, self-righteous idiot nobles. I'll play this game by my rules. Don't do anything stupid, son. Think before you act. And if anything new happens, contact me. Love you. The conversation between Freya and her mother, Duchess Solivar, was of a different tone. Sabotaging a new headmaster? It has always happened, even to the most insignificant petty bootlicker, let alone to a young radical, uncaring for the political gains. Her voice was bored. Everyone with half a brain knows there is a huge storm ahead, and I don't plan getting caught in the middle of it. We will remain neutral. In every war, the real winner is the one that does not take part in it, profiting from both sides. Whoever comes on top, I'm covered. Contact me if you need to get out of the academy. You are the first real mage of a household Solivar. Act as one. Take no unnecessary risks. Then she hanged up the call. Well, I love you too, Mother. Thanks for asking me if I was all right or if I needed something. You and your precious Solivar household. I'll do whatever I want. For once, I am in control. You need me, not the other way around. Freya was so angry that only Quilla's worried face prevented her from throwing the communication amulet against the wall. Floria's father, Orion Ernas, was of course well informed too. He was deeply involved in one of the factions that were closest to the Queen, so nothing she said was actually of any relevance outside the attack on Uriel. Orion had kept her in the dark because he didn't want her to grow up scared by rumors about the impending civil war. He had hoped for the stalemate to hold until she was big enough to choose what to do, but time was running out. He told her the same things Marchioness de Star had explained to Lid. I think they are closing ranks. Attacking a member of a magical bloodline means that they are not willing to tolerate neutrality anymore. Either you are with them or against them. What can I do for the Queen, Dad? You? Orion laughed for the first time since that conversation started. What can you possibly do? You are just a kid. The real battle is out here. What has happened is barely a ripple effect. This is but the last attempt to sabotage in a long line. They had simply raised the ante a little. Instead of worrying for the Queen, here is what you can do for me. Pick a ballot. Stay out of trouble. And if push comes to shove, attack first and ask question later. Always go all out. No one can get killed in the academy. The castle does not allow for that. It's the first time I hear about this. How do you know for sure? It's supposed to be a secret, but when your daddy was younger and hot-blooded, someone dared to draw his sword against me. I lost my temper and... Well, let's just say that the Academy's race saved a lot of people that day. Things escalated quite a bit. If it's a secret, aren't you breaking some rules by telling me? Do you think I would put a secret that the gods only know how many idiots like me know above my daughter's safety? I would rather see you safe and expelled than let anyone put a finger on you. At that point, Lid had already returned in the room. Not exchanging any pleasantry saved him a lot of time. Only Freya was already done with her amulet. Lid didn't know what to do. Being a commoner was a double-edged sword in that situation. It meant that he and Quilla were more likely to be left alone, but at the same time, they had no way to help their friends. When all the conversation ended, with the exception of Lit, they shared the information received. Their Marchioness had made clear from the beginning that she had already enough on her plate. Revealing their connection would only draw more attention, something that both were glad to avoid. I guess we both need a ballad now, Uriel sighed. Being a victim was a scary feeling for him. His family name had always been the strongest sword and shield, yet now it was reduced to a bullseye. We need to go to Linjo's office, Floria nodded, and let everyone know that even powerful people like you are scared? That would mean playing into their hands. Lit objected. What do you propose then? Ignore my father's advice and wait for the next move? That would be stupid. I say to play it smart. He took out his ballot, pushing the button twice. A warp step opened, and Professor Trask came out of it. When he saw where he was, he furrowed his brows in disapproval. Kid, a ballot is not a toy. Don't try giving me the I accidentally sat on its bullshit. We need to see the headmaster. It's an urgent matter. I had to resort to the ballot because we cannot allow for others to know about it. I am sorry if I caused a false alarm. Lit deeply bowed, even though, if necessary, he would do it again. Trask's interest was piqued. He opened another portal, leading straight to the headmaster's office. The room was immaculate, as Lit remembered it. His hardwood brown desk was right in front of a glass wall, capable of blocking the excess daylight or amplifying, keeping the light uniform during the whole day. Several pieces of paper were arranging themselves in order piles after he finished looking at them. Hearing the gate open, he turned towards them. He seemed to have aged 10 years since the last time they saw him.